This question to Professor Helm. So he started off your talk by saying, things are getting bad and have been going bad for a long time. And then at the end of your talk, you said 2011, there was a promise of the government that you're going to leave for the next generation, things are better. So 2011, 2019, 20 now. So we're about a third way through, got about 18 years to go. What do you think is going to get better?
So, my starting point is the path we're on is not one that's going to, notwithstanding fantastic examples like that last one and Chipley Meadow, is not going to crack it. Okay? So, from my perspective, unless we put these issues at the heart of government, we're not going to make much progress, except in exceptional circumstances with particular species, etc. And rich people who've got lots of land that can afford to do certain kinds of things. So it is now, it's like the Climate Change Act, right? You can reasonably say, do I really believe we're going to achieve net zero? Well, I have my doubts. But it's a legislative requirement, and you see, for example, the decision on Heathrow, what happens when you have a legal requirement to do something. There are going to be a set of statutory targets, according to the Environment Bill, for one of which includes thriving wildlife. I'm working very hard on how to define that, which governments are going to be held accountable to. Now, will they do it? I'm not at all sure, right? But you tell me a better way of trying to turn this around in a constructive way, engaging with the political process as it is, and the electorate we have, and I will sign up to it immediately. But this is a hell of a lot better than where we were 10 years ago. It's true that things are not getting better, and we're doing a lot of continuous damage, but the scope to do this is enormous. And if you look on the agricultural side, I have grave reservations about this stuff in the agricultural bill, but if you look of what we've got in history comparison, there's only two other dates to compare the agricultural bill going through Parliament now. 1947 and entrenching Dig for Victory in that terrible British policy, and then joining the EU and doing the CAP. Okay? It may be there's a lot of backsliding, but on the face of the agricultural bill is there'll no longer be public money for private benefit to pay people to own land, it'll be for public goods. Now, I think it's the job of people who are really interested in conservation to see if we can get behind this and this legislative programme and try and make it happen and bring the public and the voters and all those people in the red wall seats to try to come behind this. And I think it is a sea change. I won't live long enough to work out whether it really works, but I'll do my best to try and make it happen. And all of these wonderful things that people are doing, I would like them to be into a bigger picture in which we are turning around on a large scale the ecosystems that we have in this country, turning around the natural sequestration of carbon, and trying to do that in a legal framework which forces people not to duck it whenever the going gets tough.
Can I make a comment on that? Dieter asked for a better way, and one of my interests is researching those better ways, and to be honest, the Dutch found a better way. If we looked at the Dutch Delta in the 1980s, the Dutch Delta management was an absolute mess. It was polluted agriculture, it was canalised rivers. Now they've turned that around, and they've turned that around to incredible rewilding areas across the Netherlands. The way they turned that round was this point about how do you get to the heart of government on it. They turned it round with demonstration projects, pilot projects, doing things which were just outside the normal and which culturally people were interested in, which progressive professionals got around, such that you had something which the bureaucracies could not ignore on it. And then the institutions, they have a choice. They either have to say, oh, it's not good, how can you do that politically, if it's really cool and funky, and what have you, and that is how they got transitioned. And those were spaces of innovation not only in nature conservation, but innovation in finance, in identity building, in rejuvenating economies. So we talk a lot about Knepp, and Knepp actually is our little demonstration project. But Knepp is actually a model farm. It can't scale to wider society on that. And what I would say actually is that Dieter thinks that the way to go is that, you know, we just said that as conservationists we should do these things. Unfortunately, and I say this with great respect, natural capital has been too much of a gift to our government, and it is blocking innovation within conservation because it's too easy just to use natural capital and flip it back into our 1980s way of just counting habitat and really simple metrics of that.
Well, I obviously disagree about that. I just want to make a comment about Knepp, because we keep coming back to this. Okay? So, brilliant description of the transition of way outside my area. The question about Knepp is you're looking at an area which was woodland, and it was dug up in the dig for victory. You can see the pictures of the huge machinery which wrecked what was there before. It was terribly bad war, land. Okay? It got to the beginning of this century where it was not making money, even though it had £500,000 of subsidy. Okay? And the nice thing about Knepp, in a way, is that it's an incredibly sensible economic thing for them to do. And it's very profitable. You know, if you're paid $500,000 and you can't make money out of farming, how about getting rid of all your costs and receiving $500,000 in subsidy? Okay? And Knepp is £500,000 of public subsidy, 127,000 for selling the animals, and getting on towards $250,000 going up for the safari park. That's what economics is. The question you have to ask yourself about Knepp is not whether it's great these people have done what they've done and it's better than what the intensive agriculture was. It is about whether it is allowed to go into any product. The really important question is, if you have £500,000 to spend on conservation, and I gave it to Plantlife, right, to be provocative, okay, what would you spend on? Because of Knepp, they can't do anything else because it's not profitable. So the Knepp thing is not the consequence of the subsidy. If the subsidy stops tomorrow, Knepp will have to go on because it's deeply unprofitable to farm. So we have to take this scarce resource and spend it in the ways that give us the best environmental bucks in all the broad systems that you describe in this framework. And as for the Dutch example, I have to say, like the Welsh one, it is highly controversial as to whether it really is what people say, and there are lots of objections to the frame it's taken, and you have to look at the overall ecological performance and the evidence. It's a huge debate, but I just don't want to take it as read that this is some prime example, so much better than natural capital, which is going to solve that problem. No.
Oh, we're going to have another question because we're running out of time. Last question, I'm afraid. There's a question there.
I just want to ask, in relation to rewilding and food and climate change, I think some relatives in the room, if you go to DEFRA events with farmers, and I come from a farm, is that farmers are concerned about hunger in society. And what I notice is that public land where government agencies could actually lead, they're not doing it. So if you look at highway verges, if you look at railway lines, if you look at motorways, these are all natural connecting corridors. And in Gloucestershire where I live, we have a massive difficulty in getting highways to actually operationalise good practice from other parts of the country, such as Dorset. So something like Knepp is perhaps interesting, but a very small scale. We need to go much bigger scale and much faster. And I don't know why the government agencies sit there and not tackling their own highways and other statutory bodies who control a lot of land. So we're not hearing that today about government actually delivering.
Sorry, Claire.
Well, yes. I mean, and I think it's, it is something that every bit of government needs to think about. It's the conversations we're having within Wales, and it is interesting how some of those conversations are starting to feel different. And so conversations with Transport for Wales and things are beginning to talk about railways as corridors and wildlife corridors and how we use that. But it is slower than I would like, and it's slower than it probably should be, because, you know, Welsh Government has declared a climate and environment emergency, and yeah, that's not just about my organisation doing things, it needs to be across the whole of government, and I think that's as true in England or Scotland. And I think the thing about food and production is important, and you know, it is that getting that balance in place. I certainly don't want to see Wales as a place which is, I suppose, a sort of almost a theme park of what it might be. I want to live and work in a living landscape, and that's about as well as plants and nature, and that's about making a living and producing food that people can enjoy and you know, get the benefit of. So I think it is trying to create that balance between economically viable farming and nature conservation. Like Dieter, I feel really heartened by what I see of future agricultural subsidy schemes. I just don't want to wait 5 years.
Trevor, do you want to say something about
I was going to say, I think that there's potential for a real win-win here, particularly with livestock farming. And I think you're looking at that reduction. I mean, I think the figure is something like 14% reduction in beef consumption within the last 1 or 2 years, which is an enormous change within the market. And I think, you know, if we're looking at conservation grazing, if we're looking at reducing your next style of farming, not taking over in the future, but certainly being a large component of our food production sector, then, you know, we're looking at you know, smaller numbers of livestock on the land, but we're looking at better quality as well, because there's a huge amount of work at the moment looking at, you know, the health benefits of species-rich pastures for livestock, and that's really important. Self-medication and things like that are really important, and all those multiple benefits as well. You know, there's some great research out of CH looking at the value of putting species-rich wildflower strips and other things into arable contexts, and the increase in yield that you get. You get this massive increase in yield in the crops because of insect predation. So working with these natural systems, I think we are at a turning point where people are actually saying, yeah, something's got to change here. I think just quickly on Knepp, I think part of the Knepp story is turning off that flow of pesticides and herbicides and fertilisers, and I think that's something that we're not talking very much about, and I think that would have a step change effect across our agricultural sector if we started doing that and really looking at reducing those inputs. That's something that we're not really talking as all focuses on the animals. So I think part of the Knepp story is that, and that can only be beneficial for all of us through that free trade system.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but I just want to ask one question of each of you, which can be answered in a single word. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the state of nature in the countryside at the moment? Dieter, optimistic or pessimistic?
I'm struggling to think it could get worse, so I'm...
I'll take that as an optimist. There.
I sort of have to believe that we can do better.
Yep.
So, optimist.
Good. But at social level, we've got to innovate and do something.
Which was that?
Sorry?
You're an optimist or a pessimist?
I'm an optimist, yeah.
Good.
I mean, we can do so. It's almost like the $6 million man, you know. We have the technology, we can rebuild nature. Trevor?
I'm always an optimist.
I think you might be.
I think rewilding has really sparked a debate which is much needed and really valuable. Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-rewilding. I think we just need to be careful about, is it delivering everything that we want across our nature conservation? But the fact that everybody's talking about rewilding now, I think can only be good. So I'm an absolute optimist.
Yeah. ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Thank you again to Baroness Royal for allowing us to be here at Somerville, which is such a treat. And thank you to our distinguished panel, Dieter Helm, Clare Pillman, Paul Gypsum, and Trevor. Thank you very much.